New life. This is your pastor, Pastor Richard Martin. How are you? I want to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Whenever you may be listening to this, I hope that your day has begun, is going, or is ending well. Today, I want to speak with you about affirmation. 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 Before I descended onto one knee to propose to my now bride of 7 years, can you believe that? We made the decision to surrender and submit our relationship to a kind of troubleshooting. We went to pre-engagement counseling. During this 3-month process, which was at times challenging but most definitely constructive, we had the chance to raise questions and answer hard questions, to explore our family histories in greater detail, to acknowledge some things that needed to be placed on the table, and ultimately to get a sense of one another's love languages. That term, or those terms, have been popularized by Gary Chapman. The 5 Love Languages is a book that many have read over the past 20 years, and he's distilled 5 love languages. You've heard them before: giving gifts, quality time, acts of service, physical touch, and words of affirmation. It's interesting because Dr. Chapman suggests that we all need to receive love in all 5 of these ways, but that each person has a primary and secondary love language that they need to receive from those they love. I won't ask you what yours are, you probably know them, but I'll tell you one of mine. What we discovered as we took that multi-point test to discover what our love languages are, I found out something that I guess I knew, but I didn't know it in these words, that one of the ways I feel loved by my bride is through words of affirmation. And as I think back to the very first day I met her, that day in May, back in 2009, that sounds like the opening lyrics of a song maybe I should write. It was that day in May in 2009. I saw your face and I said, girl, you fine. I wanted her to talk a little longer because I loved her beautiful Bermudian accent. And since then, it's been my privilege to hear that voice share words of affirmation for 7 years. Wow. You know, affirmation is something we all need, isn't it? Even if it's not your primary love language, each and every one of us needs affirmation. It is a part of our human composition to grow from uplifting words. I want you to know that comments of correction and statements of criticism, they have their place, but every now and then we need to hear an affirming word. A good job, I have found, goes a long way, doesn't it? A pat on the back, a warm embrace, a firm, congratulatory handshake, it can nudge a person's world in the right direction. I've heard it said like this before, and I believe this to be very true, that affirmation tells the heart to keep on beating. Affirmation is one of those streams of vital nourishment for our emotions and for our minds. As I look back over my life, I know that I am where I am today in many ways because of affirmation. Affirmative gestures, affirmative gifts, affirmative words that have come my way, often unsolicited. I remember when I was in, I think it was 4th or 5th grade, maybe 6th grade, one of my former teachers stopped me in the middle of the school day and she said, Richard, you can be the President of the United States of America one day. I hadn't given it any thought before, and if I'm honest, I haven't given it too much thought since. But in that moment, it was as if chambers of possibilities were opened in my heart. I'll never forget when I was trying to grow in endurance training activities, endurance running in particular. I thought that in order for me to take the name or the label runner, I am a runner, I had to run a certain distance first. And my coach said, "Can you run?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Then you're a runner." Those words, "you are a runner," affirmed me in the direction that I wanted to go. And when my wife stood before me on February 8th, 2015, and she said those two words, "I do." I do. Those were some of the most affirming and accepting and approving words I'd heard. What about you? When's the last time you have heard a word of affirmation? When's the last time you have stood at a distance and observed someone affirming someone else? I had the chance to see that when my wife, she was affirmed by the parent of 2 children who come online every Sabbath morning for children's praise. And they said to her, "Thank you for your ministry to our children." And just standing on the side, seeing that unfold, it was beautiful. You know, even Jesus himself needed a word of affirmation, and the Bible in Matthew 3:17 records it. His heavenly Father said, "And suddenly a voice came from heaven saying, 'This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased.'" God the Father affirmed Jesus, his Son. New Life, if you would just allow me to take a few moments to affirm you. The privilege, and I mean it when I say that, the privilege has been mine to serve as your pastor for the past 5 years. I have had the chance to observe and partner and lead and follow, to serve and to be served, to speak and listen, to learn and to teach. And over these 5 years, I have amassed a number of experiences, a number of observations, sometimes without you even knowing that I was watching, listening, gleaning, and gaining from you. And I want to affirm you. I want you to know from my lips, I am well pleased. I'm pleased with you. What do I mean? Well, whenever I've had the opportunity, whether in correspondence with colleagues or traveling to minister, in my bio it says that he pastors the prestigious New Life Seventh-day Adventist Church, and I mean that. I think that this church is prestigious because of what the Spirit of God has enabled you to do over these past 20 plus years of your experience, a portion of which my family and I have served as your pastoral family. I want to affirm you for just 3 features and facets of the New Life experience that I have taken delight in over these past 5 years. There are more, but I just want to underscore 3. I affirm you for your resilience. Your resilience. Through the stories that you have shared with me from the annals of your own church history, that word resilience leaps out and grips me. There's been a church flood. There has been a church fire. There have even been a few crises. And yet you have, by God's grace, shown Spirit-manufactured resilience that says, in the face of these difficulties, in the face of these challenges, we will not sit down, we will not turn away. As Hebrews says, we will not cast away our confidence. We will continue to believe that the Lord will see us through this. And hey, I must say this, the pandemic came out of nowhere, thrusting us into uncharted territory. And New Life, it was a privilege to pastor a resilient church who had to adjust and adapt in the midst of unknowns, going from a gathered church to a scattered church, and now having to adjust resiliently again to this gathered iteration and still learning. what it means to be hybrid, both in person and online. But you've not only modeled resilience, and I affirm you for that. New Life, I affirm your spirit of support. Whether it was the elders and I going to hospitals to visit those who were ill, or how you rally around those in the hour of grief when a loved one has been lost, how you have ministered with sympathy and empathy to your own brothers and sisters. Whatever season of life they have been in, I have seen support. Text messages sent, cards purchased, signed, sealed, and delivered. As your pastor, I affirm you for living out the gospel of Jesus Christ by bearing with one another in burdensome seasons and showing that spirit of support. And then finally, I want to affirm you for your kindness. One of the things that people often say whenever there are reports of their experience with New Life, especially those who are first-time and perhaps last-time guests, they're just traveling down the eastern seaboard. They are coming to visit military families. They're dropping off their child to college. They will say, "This is a kind church." And you know what? You are. Now, being resilient and supportive and kind does not mean that you're perfect, but I do believe that these are markers that you have surrendered to a perfect God who is perfecting the people who make up his church. New Life. This has been our church, and in you we are well pleased. I want you now to take these words of affirmation, and after you have let them seep into the secret places of your heart, won't you go and affirm someone else? Make it verbal. Make it visible. Make it tangible. And make it frequent. So that as you have received affirmation, so give that affirmation to someone else. Keep being resilient. Keep being supportive. And keep being kind. And not only will we be pleased with you, but more and most importantly, our God in heaven will look down and say, "I am pleased with them." I'll talk to you soon.